So I hope you, so, okay. All right. See, good evening. Hey, Lucy, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. And
Good.
Sarah, nice to see you. And Christine, very nice. We're happy you're here with us.
Thank
And
you.
we know more people are joining us, but we think we might get started. Maybe we'll wait one more minute. But we're so excited about the experts we have on this call. And I think it'll be a really rich learning and conversation. So yeah, and I guess people are starting to wind down. Their districts, their county office schools are probably starting to wind down, I'm guessing.
Yes, finally.
Yeah.
May and early June was a busy, busy month.
Yes, yes. And I so hopefully this will be inspiring and we can take this into the new school year. Um, and hi, Kim. So nice to see you. Oh, she's still connecting. All right. And Kim, it's very nice to see you. I'm excited you're joining us. So we will get started since we're right now a small group. We'll engage with you a little more personally. So the topic tonight was literacy and understanding reading struggles. And the purpose today, you'll get to connect with each other from across the state. And I know we have people from north to south. And then you're going to learn about the latest research on dyslexia from a very, very well-known researcher in California. We're very pleased to have her. You're going to understand some of the new policies for screening and reading difficulty. And then we are very fortunate to get a state legislative update hot off the press. So that's our goal today. Next slide. Uh,
Mm,
okay.
Sure.
All right, so just a really quick overview, just in case someone doesn't know who ACCBE is, but we're the Association of the California County Boards of Education. We are the only statewide organization focused solely on county boards of education. We're new. We really just kicked off our work in January, and we have 4 key areas of work, which is advocating both locally and at the statewide level around both what county boards do, what we need from the legislature, and to support the young people, the young people, the At Promise young people we serve. We're also about partnerships. We have a nice developing partnership with the County Soups and the Small School Districts Association, and we're working on our partnerships, the partnerships tonight, as well as we've had some conversations with UCLA, UC Merced, Reach University. So we're building our partnerships. We're also about engaging and building the capacity of our members to be leaders and effective in the governance. And finally, and really important to a lot of us involved with ACCBE, especially on the board, is we want people to be forward looking, to really think about what needs to change in education so that the kids we see can have different outcomes. It's been too long, the same outcomes for our kids. So we are trying to bring you innovative ideas to help you be forward looking and thinking about new ways, better ways to serve our students. So that's who we are. And I believe, Chris, this is you.
Yes, I'll go ahead and get us started this evening with an icebreaker. Good evening, everybody. So, since we're going to be talking about learning how to read and dyslexia and the different strategies or different ways that folks learn how to read, I thought it would be cool to kind of just have a survey, right? A quick poll around the group. How did you learn to read? What was the common practice for teaching reading when you were younger? I'll go ahead and start and model. Since we only have a few folks today, I hope to hear from everyone on the call. I am a teacher, former teacher, so I will go ahead and call on you if you don't speak up after I'm done speaking, but I'll model the practice. So when I was younger, I remember that phonics was a big thing. And throughout my life, my mother just always hammered into me, sound it out, sound it out, sound it out. It didn't matter what word it was, how long it was, or what book I found it in. It could have been a dictionary, one of her chapter books, or one of my chapter books. If I came to a word, she'd say, sound it out, and then go define it. And those two things, phonics versus her, was how I learned how to read. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Christine.
Hi, I'm Christine. I'm from Stanislaus County. I am not a board member, but a board member invited me. So she passed along your good things you're going on here. But common practice for teaching reading when I was younger. Do y'all remember the Sam and Matt books? And it was a lion and another little creature, and it was all phonics-based patterned reading. So I'll go ahead and pass it off to Tammy.
Hello. So I was one of those kids that just came to school already reading, and I don't know how I learned to read. I just magically knew how to read. But in school, they used Dick and Jane. So that will probably tell all of y'all how old I am. And I will hand off to Marlu.
Hi, well, I grew up in Italy, and so Italian is a very transparent language that has a very direct mapping between sounds and letters. Every letter corresponds to a sound. So Italian kids learn to decode in 6 months. It's very easy. And then they start going crazy with morphology and grammar, because that's the part of the language that is very difficult. So yes, maybe a little different.
Marlu, that was so insightful. Who do you want to pass it to next?
Oh, sorry, I see only you. Maybe Yvonne?
Here we are.
Well, hello, this is Yvonne. Can you all hear me? This I have to use my phone.
Hi, Yvonne.
Yes, we can.
Hello, everyone. Well, how I learned how to read. First of all, I never learned how to read in Chinese, and really total failure until I arrived United States at age 17 and went on later on and majored in French, Spanish out of UCLA, and definitely I am fluent English, but the Chinese language without any phonemic awareness, I totally fumbled. But however, right now I went back and learned the various dialect of Chinese through a phonemic awareness methods. Yes, I know how to read now. Thank you.
Love that, Dr. Chan. Thank you. Since she's on her phone, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Sarah Butler, Contra Costa County. How did I learn to read? We had phonics books, but I also remember Dick and Jane, although I remember my mom making fun of those books. But and then there was Spot, I don't know. It was a long time ago. I can't remember exactly. Thank you.
Sarah, who do you want to pass it to?
Let's see. Kimberly.
Good evening, all. I am enjoying the conversation. This is Mrs. Kimberly Tapscott Munson, trustee of Fresno County Board of Education, Area 1, retired school librarian with 20 years of outstanding service to Fresno Unified School District, and you are speaking my language. And I am dated as well. See Spot Run, that is the other verbiage, and Dick and Jane. Yes, I am 61 and loving the conversation. I had a love for books at an early age. I was an early organizer. My mother would put me into her shoe closet and have me organize her shoes in pairs. And I found pleasure in it. I love pairs, twos. Here we go, books, Dewey Decimal System, neat shelves. Started it all off. But the love of books was definitely implanted early in my life. I grew up in the Bay Area, went to school in Berkeley and enjoyed that area, and then grew up also here in Fresno where my parents' family is. And the European concept of teaching grammar, that is what is lacking. I do concur. Thank you. And I shall pass off to, let's see, Louise, my favorite aunt's name. I don't think Louise has been called. I called her Aunt Lou. Lou, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Kimberly. Well, have a hard time remembering. I read early. My mother read to me books and books and books. And so I learned to read easily. I lived on the East Coast, so I didn't have Dick and Jane. We had Alice and Jerry, and loved the library. I'm a retired school district superintendent. I'm on the Nevada County Board of Education. And Kimberly, one of my proudest accomplishments of my career is building 6 new school libraries in the Canocti Unified School District when I was superintendent there. So, and let's see, I don't know who to pass it on to.
We have Lucy
I've
right
become a
here
little,
and Juliana left.
okay, well, I see Lucy right here, so I'm going to pass along to Lucy.
Hi, everybody. So Lucy Hendry, Imperial County Office of Education. And how I learned to read, I've always had a love for reading. It was kind of my escape. I grew up in a huge Hispanic family. I have 8 brothers and sisters. And that's how I would escape and take off and read anything I can get my hands on. Phonetic books started it all. The Dick and Jane books were a staple in our family. Thank you. And I will pass it on to Juliana.
Hello. So I was trying to think, how did I learn? Because like for some of you, that was a really long time ago for me. And you jogged my memory with Spot and Dick and Jane. That's how I learned. But books were huge in my family. Both of my great grandmothers were collectors of the Doubleday Book Club. I don't know if anybody remembers that, the Doubleday Book Club. It was a book a month, a book of the month club. So I had 3 bookcases in my home filled with books of all different types. I would say I did not always read age appropriate books. Got in trouble a couple times at school for teachers thinking I was a little too precocious of a reader. But my parents always were always there for me, encouraging me to read whatever I want. I am now a reader. I wish my retirement job would just be able to read whatever I wanted all the time. So there we go. And I think, was there one other person, Chris?
There was Christina and Raina left.
Oh, Christina. I'll pass it to Christina.
She might be on mute still.
Okay. How about we pass it to Raina then?
Yeah, let's go ahead. I don't think Christina's audio is coming through.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Raina Lari, and I'm from the Santa Clara County Board of Education. Actually, I don't remember how I really learned to read. I learned to read in Karachi, Pakistan, before I went to school. And I remember reading in English and Urdu. But I do know that my son learned how to read through phonics. And he learned very fast. So the method worked well for him.
Thank you, Raina. Christina, do we have you with us now? I think we might be having some mute issues. The chat is available. We'll circle back around, but we'll go ahead and keep going for time's sake. I'll pass it back over to you for the framing today.
Thank you. And I'm going to also invite my colleague, friend, fellow SCOE family, Tammy Wilson, to help set up the framing. And before I hand it off to her, 2 things. I want to tell you a little bit about her, but before I do that, I actually just want to share my own story. And it's not about me, it's about my oldest child. And I think hopefully this story will help frame this conversation. My oldest is 33 now. And we obviously read to him when we were home, but I basically trusted the teachers of the school to teach my kid to read. And in second grade, I got a call from the teacher and she said, you know, there's something not quite right about David and his reading. And she said, I think he is struggling. I don't know what it is, but he is not reading at the level he should be for a second grader. And that took my husband and I and my son on a journey. We fortunately had the resources to hire a tutor. And we found out he had dyslexia. And we found this amazing tutor who basically helped him overcome that challenge. But, you know, we were a fortunate family, and I'm grateful to that teacher for saying something, but there was no assessment done at that time for all kids. And I felt lucky that this teacher decided to say something to me. So with that as a background, I want to introduce you to who you're also going to hear from her later, but Tammy Wilson is the Director of English Language Arts in the Sacramento County Office of Ed, and she's project lead on the California Literacy Roadmap. She serves as the California Reading Difficulties Risk Screener Selection Panel and was the project lead for the California Dyslexia Initiative. She's been an educator for over 39 years, and I have the pleasure of working with her at the county office, and she is leading our local literacy initiative for Sac County. I could say a lot more things about her, but I'm going to stop there and ask Tammy to join me on the Zoom here and to help us frame up a little bit about why this issue of early identification of struggling readers and looking and understanding dyslexia is important.
Well, thank you, Bina. I'm happy to be here tonight. And this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It's my passion. And I think the biggest thing that I can say that will frame this from a California perspective is that when you look at our statewide reading and literacy data, the CASP, which is the assessment that all students in grades 3 through 8 and 11 take in our state, only 47% of our students are meeting or exceeding grade level. What that means is 53% of the students in our state are not reading at grade level. And that doesn't seem to be that shocking to anyone anymore. I feel like people have become immune to that. So one of the things that I try to frame it by is saying, I personally have 2 children. Would I be able to say, well, one of them can learn to read and maybe not the other one? Because that's what our statewide data says. I have 4 grandchildren, about to have 5, but right now I have 4. So it's kind of the same thing. Would I say 2 of them are going to learn to read? And let's just pick 2 that maybe aren't going to read at proficient levels. So the whole issue of early reading and intervention is near and dear to my heart. I think it's something that as citizens, we should all be concerned about, because obviously it has huge financial implications. And Mara Liu, Dr. Mara Liu, who Bina is going to introduce in just a moment, is going to share with us some information around dyslexia so that we can really learn about some of our learners in our state are not learning to read because they have a neurodiversity, but some of them are not learning to read because we just don't have the systems in place to effectively teach reading. So I'm going to hand back to Bina so she can introduce the next speaker.
Great. Thanks, Tammy. And, you know, I want to add one thing to what Tammy was saying, and that is, as county board members, you know, we are the school board of record for our juvenile hall and community schools. And when you look at the data on those students, a lot of them are reading at the 3rd and 4th grade level when they come to us. And the thing I'm excited about is this state is realizing that we can't allow children that so many children who aren't able to read fall into having problem behaviors. They get frustrated, they drop out of school, they end up in our juvenile hall and our community schools. And this initiative that we're going to talk about today is all about prevention, early intervention. And I think for this, I'm just happy to know that our state is moving in that direction, and hopefully down the road, we don't need to exist with our court and community schools if our kids are actually doing well and performing well in the K-12. So anyway, I just want to add that to the framing, that this is important to us as county board members from that lens as well. And with that, I am very excited to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Maria Luisa Gorno-Tempini. And she is a behavioral neurologist at the Charles Schwab Distinguished Professor in Dyslexia and Neurodevelopment at the University of California, San Francisco. She directs the Language Neurobiology Lab, the UCSF Dyslexia Center, and the Multitudes Universal Screening Project. Her clinical and research work focuses on speech and language disorders in children with neurodevelopmental differences and adults with neurodegenerative conditions. The aim of her program is to improve screening, diagnosis, and care for individuals living with language and behavioral challenges, as well as to enhance our understanding of the cognitive and brain mechanisms underlying oral and written language abilities in diverse populations. And we are just so honored to have her join us tonight and share her research and her wisdom and her experience. So Dr. Maria Luisa Gorno-Tempini, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and the kind introduction. I'm sorry for my complicated long name. It is decodable in Italian. So I'm going to share my screen so we can go through a few slides. And I'm a behavioral neurologist, meaning that I'm a physician. So I see and care for individuals with language and behavioral issues across the lifespan. And I'm very proud to be working at UCSF, that I don't know if many of you know is only a biomedical, only quote unquote, but it focuses on biomedical, is a biomedical campus that focuses on translational research and care that is very focused on curing human challenges. So not many know, UC Berkeley doesn't have a medical school. So UCSF, it's kind of the San Francisco Bay Area UC medical school and research hub for human-related health issues. And behavioral neurology really sits across neurology and psychiatry in the sense that focuses on cognitive and emotional challenges that are neurobiological, that have a clear neurobiological cause. Traditionally, we said that you could kind of see them with imaging of the brain. So stroke and tumors and MS, these kind of neurological conditions in which there was a visible change in the brain. Now we know that all behavioral and cognitive issues that individuals go through depend on the brain, whether they're visible or invisible. So the boundary between neurology and psychiatry are becoming more and more fuzzy. And also the boundaries between cognitive challenges such as language, memory, mathematical thinking, visual spatial functioning, and more emotional challenges like anxiety and depression and hyperactivity or emotional dysregulation. We think about all of these behaviors and behavioral challenges as coming from specific network in the brain. And this is what the research in the past few decades, really, we've made a huge challenge. We often hear that, we're far away from understanding the brain. And I think it's true, because it's kind of like saying we're far away from understanding the universe. It's true. There is a lot that we still need to discover, but we've made a huge step forward. And the huge step forward and really the goal of our center and UCSF as a whole is really translating these these findings faster into the community. So in our case, it's from the neuroscience lab to the classroom and the teachers and back. Another big step forward in science is being more community oriented. So really listening to what the community, and in the case of medicine, the patients or the participants or the students and the teachers need to make their life better, and focusing our research on that. So we discovered that there are many networks in the brain that we can think about as kind of different muscles in the brain that are all related and highly interconnected. This is, of course, a very simplified pictures, but also have some specialized functions. In big strokes, we can say that the left hemisphere is involved in the symbolic aspects of language and in understanding and producing language. So very different aspects of cognition that really focus on language and symbolic processing. So some aspects of math are really also left hemisphere. The right hemisphere is more focused on visual spatial functioning and all other aspects of executive functioning that are more linked to visual information, and also social emotional functioning. And I always like to say also visual math, high level visual math such as calculus, we think more as right hemisphere. Of course, all of it is interactive, is different in different individuals, how specialized and how lateralized it is. But we really think that language evolved as a mean that our ancestors had to name tools that they started manipulating with the right hand. So humans started creating tools and they start manipulating them with the right hand. The right hand is represented in the brain in the left hemisphere. And so that's how we think that language also is represented in the left hemisphere. Instead, emotional processing, which is very visual in nature, or it was in evolution very visual in nature, we had to recognize the difference between a lion and a gazelle very quickly visually so that we could run away from them, be scared and run away from them. And so visual spatial functioning and emotions really are segregated together on the right hemisphere of the brain. Of course, it's much more complicated. And interesting other finding that I think is important for education is thinking that the development of these neural networks goes through some critical periods. The brain of neonates is very unspecialized. It's a little bit, now I like to use the example of the large language model. Think about the hardware over large language network that then gets fed information. So there is a genetic component, of course, on how the brain is constructed, but then it's specialized depending on what information we give it. So I always like to point this out to point out how important the work of teachers and the environment is on specialization in the brain. And there are some critical periods. There are certain times in which the part of the brain that do very fine auditory processing develop. And if we lose that, for instance, if we don't expose children to different languages and sounds of languages during that time, they might end up having an accent. They will, of course, learn another language, but it will be harder for them to really be native speakers. The same thing for visual cortex. We know that some children have strabismus. We need to tap their eye, otherwise they might lose the function of that eye. So there are some critical periods that teachers have known about. That's how you developed all your curriculum. There are certain times in which different networks in the brain develop that are very important, but we know more about it now. And so we can fine tune different times in which we teach different things, or how do we teach different children who might have strengths and weaknesses in these different aspects of language and cognition. So why is written language particularly difficult? It's an interesting story that I've heard many times. I think the first one that really put it in this context is a colleague and mentor, Marianne Wolf. And we can really think that the human brain is speaking and understanding language for 500,000 years, while the written language is relatively relatively new, about 5,000, 6,000 years. And that's not very long in evolution. And so written language for most individuals really needs to be explicitly taught. So most children, most humans have a part of the brain. This is the brain of the first, can you see my mouse moving? Is the brain of the first patient that was really studied that had a language impairment. And this area that is called the perisylvian cortex is basically the language organ in the brain. And it's very established, it's there in every language, is being studied with fMRI, with patients. And that is basically the language organ in the brain, kind of the heart of language, is genetically specified. It's been evolving for millions of years. Instead, written language doesn't have a specific organ yet. We need to reuse the parts of the brain that do vision and executive functioning and auditory processing and put them in phonology and link them in a way that makes written language possible. So again, it needs to be taught. We need to create the automaticity and the specialization of those network. As we were hinting, it's culturally different. Yes, the sounds of different languages are different, the grammar of different languages are different, and the codes are different. I had a couple of slides and then I decided to take them out, but languages change on their phonetic and transparency. So how easy it is and how consistent the correspondence between written symbols and sounds are, and also in what kind of how symbolic and abstract the symbols are, if they're pictographic, such as Chinese, or alphabetic, such as English and Spanish. The ability, the easiness with which individuals learn how to read is very heritable. So there is an aspect that is heritable, but is also again, highly influenced by how we teach, by our culture, and by our writing system. So again, language and reading networks develop even within the language system. They develop at different time, and that's why usually children understand before they speak. The ventral system of the brain that is more involved in recognizing objects and understanding words develops earlier. The fine-tuning of auditory cortex with speech and executive functioning and grammar develops later, and that's why children learn to speak later, and probably that's where the terrible twos come from. Children understand, but they have a hard time understanding, expressing themselves, and it's very frustrating. So again, we can keep some of these concepts in mind when thinking about reading strategies. So what is developmental dyslexia? Is a specific learning disability. We'll see why sometimes we don't like to use the word disability, but we'd like to use difference. I use the two terms interchangeably depending on what is the focus I want to give. If I'm talking to children and to parents and I want to be I want to be encouraging and positive, I call it diversity or difference. When I need to advocate for these children so that the laws and policies are written so that they receive what they need, then I use disability. So for me, disability is more like a legal term than really a neurological term. What is it? Is it difficulty with accurate and or fluent word recognition and spelling, and difficulties reading, decoding print into language automatically. It can manifest in different ways depending on the language that children speak, but we do know that it's ubiquitous in the sense that it's present in every language. Now, when a language is highly easily decodable, like Italian, it might actually show up much later, even in middle school, after years and years of children being considered lazy. In a way, in English, because the code is not so regular and children more clearly often make spelling difficulties, they usually get identified in 3rd or 4th grade, which is still way too late, and we'll talk about it, but a little earlier than Italian or Spanish speaking children. So it is a difficulty that appears despite the fact that children have typical or preserved cognitive abilities and adequate instruction. So this is, again, where I am stressing adequate instruction, echoing what Tammy said earlier, because it becomes difficult to distinguish who's dyslexic and who's not if a child hasn't been taught. We have a way to do it, and we'll talk about it later, but it definitely makes it more difficult. So what is the mechanism? Often the most common kind of cognitive mechanisms, like what is the process that is making reading difficult for these children, is a phonological difficulty, meaning understanding the phonological structure of even of oral language. So typically some of the tests that we use, especially in pre-reading for phonological awareness, you can imagine a word cat, you probably all know this, but it needs to be segmented in k, at, t before we can start associating those sounds to the orthographic forms. So if children for some reason have difficulty doing those tasks, and it can be for different reasons, maybe they don't perceptually hear some of the differences between the sounds and they cannot hold them in their memory long enough, or they somehow cannot associate them with the visual symbol, then acquiring reading becomes more difficult than expected. The classic triad of symptoms that people think about in dyslexia are difficulty with phonological awareness that we just talked about, the structure, the sound structure of language. So this is a purely oral language task, and we can look at it very early. Then rapid automatized naming, so retrieving the name of objects. So again, this is not printed language yet, it's just objects, very fast, which means those are probably the children that have more difficulty associating the visual with the sound. And then many children, especially when they are identified later, the main difficulty that they might have is auditory short-term memory, meaning holding those sounds in mind. If I can hold on to k, a, t, just the same process that we use to learn a phone number, a long phone number. We need to kind of rehearse it in our head to then remembering. When children have trouble to do that, they're gonna have trouble holding those sounds long enough to associate them with the written form. So this is usually the triad of symptoms that we think about in dyslexia. Now, you might have heard different names. Dyslexia is kind of a name that hasn't been adopted in the medical world. So in the DSM, the preferred terminology is specific learning disorder with a reading impairment. It's the same thing, it's a different way of calling it. One of the issue with dyslexia or specific learning disorder with reading impairment is that it often falls through the crack between the medical world and the education world. And so these kids also fall through the cracks. And that's, as a doctor, as a physician, I'm really trying to advocate for the medical world to be more involved in the sense of providing care and services, not in a sense of negative sense of medicalizing the issue. So What is the prevalence? It depends on the clear definition that we want to use. We think that 5 to 10% of children really struggle with reading despite even being taught adequately. I'm going to go through this really quickly. Again, there's some, as every behavioral or cognitive challenge, there's different ways of defining it, and how we define it might change the prevalence that you see in papers or reports. The idea is that most children need to be taught, the majority of children need to be taught explicitly. There is the tail of the distribution of children like Tammy that they don't need to be taught. They just magically learn how to read. And then there is another percent that needs an extra dose or needs to be taught in a different way. And those are the dyslexic children. So it's very influenced, it's complicated, it's influenced by an environment. We think dyslexia has a big familiar component. It runs into families. So there is a genetic and brain and biological factor. There is the developmental periods that we talked about, the cognitive factors that all contribute into learning how to read. And then there are environmental factors, which are the ones that we can control more. We can expose children to literacy and language. We can provide the appropriate instruction or extra dose of instruction if we need it. We can be linguistically accurate and use the strengths that children have if they're multilingual. And all of these aspects will influence how dyslexia manifests. So much so that if we do all of these intervention early, even dyslexic children might not become dyslexic in the sense that they will learn how to read fluently, and thus not even being defined as dyslexic as a disability. Does that make sense? Because I think it's a really important point. There are brain changes that have been seen with dyslexia. We still don't know exactly what the biological underpinning is, and that's an area of high research in my lab, in my center, and we think that there are different kinds of causes, biological causes. It's a kind of a spectrum as other cognitive and behavioral difficulties, probably caused by different little changes in the brain. So what can we think is risk factors and common signs even before children? So reading is based on language, on what in the education world is called oral language. In the adult world, we call everything language. It's just written language and spoken language. And there are some signs that we can see very early, just difficulty learning arbitrary relations between concepts and language, such as the ABCs or names of the week, names of colors, these links that don't have much meaning behind them. Later on, as Bina was saying, actually we need to be careful, because if children or young adults have not been identified as being dyslexic, they might develop behavioral issues or emotional issues, and actually being over-identified for those issues when actually a language and reading challenge was the cause. Very commonly, as we were saying, those auditory short-term memory issues are prevalent if children are not have not received intervention early. So they might seem lazy, they might seem inattentive, they might seem disinterested. So one of my goals in retirement is writing a book that says that laziness doesn't exist. When we see a child that is lazy, something is usually going on behind it. Another very important aspect is we want to consider strengths. So interesting research findings, this really in the last 5 years, is that when one brain network for some reason is working differently or less, there is another one that probably connected to it that is working more. So there are some specific strengths that are often associated with dyslexia that we should be able to identify and leverage, and not only to remediate dyslexia, but also to recognize the strengths of every individual.
Marilu, really quickly, want to jump in and say we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, I'm going to skip this. I'm going to let Tammy talk a little bit more about interventions. I'm not an interventionist, but really early evidence-based and systematic explicit instruction with a multimodal component is really super important for these children. Now, I really want to spend the last 5 minutes talking about screening, and particularly Multitudes, which is the state-funded universal screening for reading challenges and dyslexia that it's going to be deployed across the state in more than 1,000 schools in response to a state mandate that Gina will tell us about. As I said, usually in English, dyslexic children or children who are who have challenges learning how to read get identified in 3rd and 4th grade. That's too late. It's too late for them because they've already experienced failure for many years, and it's too late for rehabilitation and interventions, because we want to capture those critical periods that we talked about early on. So the importance of early screening and intervention is educational, is social emotional, and is also economic, exactly for what Bina was saying. In privileged and well-resourced environments, children somehow often receive interventions. In less resourced environments, they might drop out of school or drop out of high school and have difficult life challenges that we want to avoid. And actually, Bina, I wanted to tell you in response with this that we have created an institute with UCLA and UC Law San Francisco and UCSF to really provide interventions and support for children that are system involved. So we maybe another day we should talk about that. So the challenge of universal screening in California has always been that 40% of children in California public schools speak another language at home. And 18% are identified as English learners. And screening early in children who are multilingual is more challenging. So that's why California has been late in the game of mandating universal screener. 93% of those 18% of children defined as English learners speak Spanish. So huge focus on Spanish. Think about multilingualism as a strength. We want to create transfers for different languages. I am a big fan of dual language instruction, and think children who have strong bilingual oral language, if they taught properly, become better readers in both languages. So just, again, we don't have time to go through this, but this is not diagnostic. Just a quick definition, screening is not diagnosing. So screening aims at identifying individuals that might need further investigations to establish a diagnosis, or might need early intervention to prevent that diagnosis from happening. So this is universal. Every single child is not just the children that the teachers are worried about, is every single child in the classroom. So the work that we did at Multitudes in the last 5 years is really focused on California and California diversity, cultural, linguistic diversity, creating and sampling children from all the different areas of our states, thinking about even having a workforce diversity to have buy-in, kind of what Tammy was saying, is was kind of a grassroots, this too, involving the teachers, involving the communities, hiring researchers and staff from the communities to really be part of the movement of that. This is not a way of labeling or creating disability when it's not there, is really a way to help create resources to teach children in a more adequate way. So 5 years researching many tasks to figure out what is the best way to predict early in kindergarten, first and second grade, and I think we can go even to pre-K using these early markers, risk factors for dyslexia, and in the right combination for children who are multilingual, monolingual, who speak Spanish or other languages, and all of this research has created this tool that is free for every private school in California, in which 10 minutes of one-on-one testing through a digital platform can identify children who are at target or who need further support. Many other tasks are available for teachers to better understand where these difficulties are coming from and identifying their strength and how to intervene. So it's not just for screening, there is an intervention and a professional development aspect to it. What is special is that a nonprofit is kind of a public option, is not linked to any publisher that is trying to sell tools to schools. And there is a constant bridge and loop between research and implementation, so that together with our children and our teachers and our families, we can keep making the tool better and create more focused intervention for these children. So it was a very collaborative effort. Thank you to all of you who participated. We've been very lucky to have a state support of this initiative through our governor and the Board of Education, and the many more than 100 schools that participated in the research, and now more than 1,000 that have signed up to use the tool. So thank you all, and happy to take any question.
Marlu, thank you so much for such a insightful and informative presentation. Bina and I were texting on the side and just gushing over how information dense it was, but as a nerd, I love that. So thank you.
Oh, I could go on for another 3 hours.
We do have time for one question, folks. Just one question. So if there's anyone who has a burning question, Kimberly, I saw your hand go up first, so go ahead, jump in with that question.
Thank you so much. Your work is outstanding. Thank you so much. As a retired school librarian with 20 years of outstanding service to Fresno Unified School District, I have seen my African-American male students, my Hispanic male students, seniors, graduating at a 3rd grade reading level for over 20 years. And I'm so glad to hear this. Now, the question is, we've got the diagnosis as well as the connection of the behavioral issues. So the correlation of the two, and you are the lady for the job with your brilliant mind. We know that our African-American male students that have been having the behavioral issues, they've been diagnosed as that, but it's the dyslexia that we believe is actually the underlying problem, that they have not been diagnosed. So you got it, you run with it, and you get that data and you support it so we can get our young men of color up to the proper reading level that they deserve to be at, that they've been at for over 20 years. I'm tired of singing this song, y'all. Let's fix it.
Thank you. Absolutely. Oh, yes.
All right, Bina, passing it back over to you.
Well, I just wanted to say that our county board just adopted.
And I'm sorry. Hi, Bina. I meant to say 2 times I've been on. I didn't say hi, Bina. Hi, honey. How are you, love? I'm so proud of you taking the mantle and doing the thing, girl. Get it, Bina. Yes, 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 Bina. Get it, get it, get it, get it. You're doing a great job, love.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate you. I was just say our board just adopted the screener, and it was in fact the multitude screener at our last board meeting, because we, like many of you county boards or county offices, run the special ed programs for some of our school districts, and we have young children in a few of those programs. So this is a very relevant tool. This was I wish I had this workshop before we made the adoption, but anyway, I did want to just point out how relevant this is to county board members, not only because we have our older students who are struggling, but also because we serve districts, and likely most of you should have already or will be adopting a tool. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Tammy Wilson to take us a little further into this conversation, talk about not just dyslexia, but generally the reading struggles overall, and how this tool will be helpful as it rolls out. So Tammy?
Hey, well, hi, everyone. Can you see my screen, Chris? Yeah, all right, thanks. All right, so I was asked to talk a little bit about Education Code 53008, which is actually the education code that requires universal screening starting next school year. And as Bina said, it's relevant to county offices because any county office that runs programs that have kindergarten through second grade students are going to need to adhere to this education code. So, oh, for some reason, sorry, my screen froze up. So I'm going to try one more time. I apologize for that, but it totally froze up right when I was trying to share. We'll try again. Best laid plans. All right. Now, Chris, you still seeing it? Yes?
Yes.
All right. I'm moving forward then. All right. So California has been putting a lot of money towards reading and literacy focused initiative, and I've put a few examples on the slide. I was the project lead for the California Dyslexia Initiative, and our partner was the UCSF Dyslexia Center and Dr. Marilu Gorno-Tempini. So we worked very closely with them as they were working on the research piece of Multitude. So very excited to have learned from her. I've worked on this state CTC update of reading and literacy standards. So really trying to improve how teachers are trained in our higher education. I was part of the K2 screening for reading difficulties panel that selected the state list, which I'll talk about soon. The state also has put a lot of funding into a comprehensive literacy state development grants, the early literacy support block grant, currently the literacy coaches and reading specialist grants, which are funding, trying to develop literacy coaches and reading specialists in our state. The literacy roadmap is a current project that I'm leading to really try to get implementation ideas out to the field. And then there are many reading instruction and intervention grants. There's also a lot of other funding that's related to literacy, but this is just an example that the state is really focused on improving literacy outcomes in our state. There's some current legislation, and I can put those links in the chat at the end, but AB 1454 will be coming or is being looked at right now and hopefully will pass. It includes some paid professional development for teachers around evidence-based reading instruction, updated instructional materials, and then a focus on administrator preparation to really get administrators up to speed on what best practices are. But I was asked specifically to talk about the role of universal screening and Ed Code 53008, which mandates that all schools, all local education agencies screen students in kinder, first, and second grade starting next school year. So that's coming soon to a school near you. And if you run programs out of your county offices that have K1 or 2 students, it has implications for you. There was a very big emphasis on the idea that this is just one piece of a comprehensive program. So Marilu talked a lot about about the complete program, the explicit systematic instruction, and what was needed to really support learners, particularly dyslexic learners. But this universal screening should just be one part of a comprehensive program. There was some funding that all LEAs got to help them do some training to support this. So if your county office is an LEA that supports students, there was some funding for professional development to train teachers to use tools. And then there's, if you're interested in reading the details of the ed code, Chris will drop some links in the chat. Did you get those on the yeah, okay. Some links in the chat where you can actually review the ed code, but I'm going to go over some of the high level areas of the education code and what the requirements are for your LEAs. So by 2025, June 30th, 2025, every LEA is must adopt one or more of the screeners. So Bina said Sacramento County Office of Education as an LEA that served K-2 students adopted Multitudes. Starting in the 25-26 school year, all students need to be assessed. There has to be notification to parents that there is going to be this screening, and that gives them an option to opt out if they want to. All new students, so when students transfer, they must be screened, or you must have documentation that they were screened in their previous LEA. And an important aspect of this screening bill is that the results of the screening need to be shared with the parents within 45 days. So this is going to cause some level of concern for parents that don't know what this all means. So as LEAs, we really need to be aware of how are we communicating with parents, and how are we helping them understand that this is not a diagnosis. This is really just an indication of some risk. As Mara Lou said, Multitudes was one of the tools that was on the state approved list. But there were 4 that made the state approved list. So you can see those on the California Department of Education website. Chris is going to put that link in the chat. So if you're at a different county office, your county office may have adopted a different tool, but all LEAs had to choose from these 4 that are listed on the screen. The bill language and the ed code is very clear that these screeners are not evaluating or diagnosing anything related to special education. So the screeners are just exactly that. They're screening, and they can't be used for any high stakes purposes. That's really important for all of us to understand, because as I said, as we're notifying parents of these screener results, they could be really concerned that it means their child is eligible for special education or something like that. That is not what it means. What it means is they may be at risk. We need to get some more information, and we need to do some early intervention to prevent those long-term academic concerns and struggles. So screening is for all students, and it really is just looking at who might benefit from additional assessment. We could explore a little more, or who might benefit from an extra dose or some early intervention. The instructional response is the really important part when we think about screening. There is a resource that Chris will put the link in the chat. So if you want to know more about universal screening and the benefits of universal screening, I encourage you to read this. It's just a quick 2-page fact sheet. But the whole idea is that the sooner we can catch these students that may have potential risk and provide early intervention, the less likely that they're going to have academic struggles, the less likely that they're going to have those behavioral and social, emotional struggles that happen when kids know they aren't learning how to read, because they tend to act out. So we don't want to wait to fail model. We want an early intervention model in K-1-2. And as Mara Lou talked about, those developmental milestones, we're catching them when their brain is ready to be learning these things. We're not waiting till it's way more difficult to catch them up. The instructional response is the key. And in the education code, when we notify parents of the results of the screener, we also have to tell them what we're going to do for their learner. Are we going to incorporate some evidence-based literacy instruction? Are we going to do additional progress monitoring? Are we going to provide early intervention in the general education setting? Are we going to do one-on-one or small group tutoring? Or do we think maybe they need some additional diagnostic assessment or further evaluation? So these 5 bullet points are called out in the education code. When we report to parents, we need to tell them what we're going to do to support their learner so that they don't have those long-term effects. The whole focus of universal screening is really about a proactive preventive approach. As Marlu said, dyslexia exists on a continuum. Reading difficulties exist on a continuum. Many struggling readers can be supported in a general education setting in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade with explicit, systematic, direct instruction, double dose of some of this extra additional instructional minutes to really make sure that the gaps don't widen, that they actually close, and that these students don't end up with those long-term academic, social, and emotional struggles. This has huge implications for county offices that run court and community schools, because if we can prevent these struggles in K-1-2 by giving high quality early intervention and support, we can prevent students, our Black young males that are struggling because perhaps they were not adequately taught in K-1-2, our English learners who perhaps were delaying teaching reading because we're worried about language, and now all of a sudden they're past the point when anyone's teaching the phonology or the phonics, right? So we really want to think about this as a preventive approach. As Bina mentioned, I am also leading a project in our own county called Sacramento County Reads. We do have a fact sheet. We have a lot of fact sheets that have information, but this particular fact sheet that Chris, I think, will put the link in the chat about, is supporting older striving readers. And it really talks about once those students are in our court and community schools. And by the way, it is estimated that 85% of incarcerated youth have below basic reading and writing skills. So you can definitely see the correlation, right? Students who struggle with reading often have limited options in their life. They have behavioral and social emotional issues because they know they're not reading. So 85% of incarcerated youth is estimated have below basic reading skills. 70% of incarcerated adults have below basic. So we know that if we can use these preventive approaches, we can slow down that school to prison pipeline, which is a goal. We don't want that school to prison pipeline. So I encourage you to check out our fact sheets. And then I also have a few other things that you may be interested in. We did a Padlet for this screening for reading difficulties, and there's a lot of resources on there, including sample letters that your county offices can use to inform folks. There are some intervention resources on there and suggestions. Our Sacramento County Reads initiative has a lot of fact sheets and other information. And then a really great resource is the National Center on Improving Literacy. They have a lot of information about intensifying instruction and what it takes to really catch them before they fall, which is a huge goal, obviously, of this work. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully I didn't go over on time, but that is, if you can't catch all the links, we can send them out to you. Yeah, Chris, sorry. I had quite a few. I'm a big link person because I figure there's a lot of expertise out there and I can't say it better than the experts. So check out the links.
I am too. I do not like gatekeeping. I like to provide the resources. So make them available, share them with folks. Bina, passing it back over to you to introduce our final speaker.
Yeah, so first I want a big thank you to Tammy for such a great, concise and filled with information, but yet very concise. So thank you for your expertise and sharing tonight with us. So I'm excited now to introduce our last speaker, Gina Plate. And Gina joins us from the DeVoe Burr Group, a government relations firm that supports clients in, among other areas, the education sector, including county offices of ed, state agencies, support agencies, and charter schools. As Senior Vice President, Gina advises clients in the education sector on policy and strategy, as well as advocates for their unique needs at local and state levels. In the past decade, Gina has been supporting schools in areas such as special education, mental health, workforce development, CTE, and funding, all topics near and dear to my heart. Gina was appointed by Governor Jerry Brown to the Advisory Commission on Special Ed and held the position of chair from 2011 to 2019. And I had the pleasure of recently meeting Gina, and she's actually the one that she and I spoke about the purpose of ACCBE, and she made a suggestion that we host this webinar or this workshop, and she suggested the speakers that you are seeing tonight. So I'm very grateful to Gina for being a supporter of ACCBE and your company, DeVoe Burr Group. And we're excited to hear from you a little bit about the legislative landscape right now, hot off the press. Gina.
Well, thank you, Bina. Good evening, everyone. It's definitely an honor to be here. Thank you for that gracious intro, and just really appreciate being a thought partner with all of you. So like Bina said, I want to offer a brief update on both the state budget and latest policy proposals in California related to literacy. So as you all know, the Newsom administration has been strongly committed to literacy from the beginning of Governor Newsom's term. And, you know, what we've seen is he is committed to best first instruction, our teachers getting rich, ongoing professional development. And he's done this through this multi-pronged approach through both the budget and the legislative process. And Tammy mentioned some of those areas that we've seen him invest in. So on the slide, I just want to ground us very briefly in the state budget process. So first, in January, everyone has their ideas. The governor puts out his proposal. The legislature starts their informational hearings. They start their learning process. In May, we hear the governor come back with what's called a May revise, where he heard from the legislature, he heard recommendations, he got new information about the status of what's happening on the ground. Then the legislature goes back into their sessions and they each come up with their own set of priorities for the budget. The Senate introduces their own budget. The Assembly introduces their own budget. This year, they're SB 101 and AB 101. And they come together eventually at the end of that process, and they submit one version of a recommended budget to the governor from the legislature. That one version went to the governor last weekend. And by statute, the governor has until June 15th to finalize a state budget. Well, I will point you to the fact that June 15th was yesterday. We do not yet have a state budget. I was very hopeful by this webinar, you would be the first to hear the updates, but we're going to keep plowing forward, and maybe by the time we get off our webinar, there will be an update. So last week, and I love that Dr. Yvonne Chan is on our call with us. Last week down in Compton, you saw the governor, you saw the state superintendent of public instruction, you saw Linda Darling-Hammond, you saw Marshall Tuck, you saw them all come for a press conference rolling out the Golden State Literacy Plan. And we will link that for you. It is a comprehensive plan that touches on all aspects of literacy through the remainder of the Newsom administration. And it made clear the ongoing commitments to some of the supports that are already in place, those supports that you heard Tammy talk about, the literacy coaches, the literacy roadmap, the learning recovery block grant, expanded learning before and after school as just some examples. And both the Senate and the Assembly said, yep, those are important, and they recommended that those continue in the state budget. And so we anticipate seeing those continue once we get the governor's version. There were also new proposals in the state budget. There was a significant recommendation for professional learning. And thanks to the work of Mari Lou and the other folks at UCSF, there was a proposal for the rollout of the Multitude Screener statewide across multiple languages. And the governor made a specific point to call that out in the press conference. He gave accolades to UCSF for their work, and he made a commitment that that screener would roll out at no cost as they worked on additional languages. Now, we are in the sausage making process still, and so we are hopeful that we will see a significant contribution to professional learning or teacher training and the rollout of the Multitude Screener. Okay, next slide. Awesome, thank you. So now I'm going to switch over to the legislative process. So over the last legislative cycle, and now into this current legislative cycle, there's been a significant commitment, ongoing commitment to address the very dismal reading and literacy skills of our children and youth that both Mary Lou and Tammy talked about. Many of you remember the Science of Reading bill that was attempted to put some broad, sort of consistent structure on reading instruction across the state. And that bill, unfortunately, failed last year. But then in January of 2025, it was the beginning of a new 2-year legislative cycle. And we saw a renewed, there's some excitement. We saw some renewed commitment to this issue. 3 bills were introduced in January related to how reading instruction and the professional development of teachers happens. There were 2 bills that rolled out in the Assembly and 1 in the Senate. Assemblymember Rubio, you'll remember, is the Assembly member that introduced the Science of Reading bill last year. And then Assemblymember Muratsuchi, who is chair of our Assembly Education Committee, and I will note running for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. They both introduced new bills this year. We then saw the Speaker of the Assembly say, hey, you know what? This is a really important issue for me. And he got and amended a bill, which means he took an existing bill and he repurposed it. He brought Assemblymember Rubio and Assemblymember Muratsuchi together with his idea and said, let's come together with one more comprehensive, broad stroke of a bill. And that's what we see in AB 1454, which is now co-authored by Rubio and Muratsuchi. And you'll see on the screen that we have lots of additional legislators. Addis, Bonta, Hoover, and Patel have all also signed on to that bill. So we're very excited about that. I will orient you to the legislative process. Again, we're in year 1 of a 2-year session. This bill is moving along just fine now that it's been gotten amended and everyone's on board. So it got out of its house of origin, which is the Assembly. It is now moving over to the Senate. It will have a policy hearing and a fiscal hearing. There will be a cost. That will happen in July. And then the final date for the governor to review and sign the bill will be the first part of October. So for you in your county office roles, and if you're thinking, what do I do to get involved? As this bill begins to move into the Senate, there's an opportunity for you to raise your hand and say, we at our county office are in support of AB 1454. And there's an opportunity to submit a letter of support. And I know that all of these legislators that care about this issue would love to see this newly formed group that is making its presence known to show up in support of this proposed legislation. So I will stop there and see if there's any questions. There's a lot of information.
That was wonderful, Gina. You know, I loved the helping us understand the timeline and the legislative process. I think that's a really good thing for all of us to kind of get up to speed on. And just, you know, you're just giving us some more background around what's going on in the legislature. Again, advocacy is one of ACCBE's priorities. And we are building relationships with people like Gina, who can be thought partners. Hopefully one day we can hire her or someone like her to be our lobbyist. And then also, you know, with building relationships with our legislators. So questions of any of our three speakers right now. I think we have at least 5 minutes before we start winding down. So questions, you can put them in the chat. You can shout them out. Okay, let's see. I think I had a question for Tammy if no one else does, and
Can
that
I
is,
just throw out, can you just send us the link for where we're supposed to send our letter of support? Just follow that information, please. Thank you.
Yep.
okay. Is that something you could do, Gina?
Yeah, I can put it in the chat.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, great.
Can I make a comment or something that I forgot to say in my?
Yes, please, please.
So again, to kind of focus on how multidisciplinary and multi-pronged our approach has been in this kind of grassroots movement that we created in the last few years is also to involve schools that specialize for kids with dyslexia. Some of them are public school. Our closest partner, the Chartwell School, is a non-public school that also takes children from the district that have a lot of expertise in teaching children with dyslexia and also training teachers to teach children with dyslexia. Chartwell in particular has a teacher training institute. And for us as UCSF alone, and of course, we've partnered with SCOE for a long time, but to try to reach as many schools and districts as possible, we have partnered with Chartwell to bring the professional learning that at least is necessary to intervene on the screening results, as Tammy was saying. So the main goal is to give tools to teachers to intervene early with these children. And I think we should use all the resources that we have in our community and comprising with the UCLA, UC and CSU collaborative, providing resources and knowledge to teach teachers in the CSU and teacher training in the CSUs. So Multitudes is a public tool that is owned by the state, so we hope it will be also used in the CSU as a teaching tool for our new generation of teachers.
Wow, that would be great if we can train up teachers coming into the profession with this knowledge. So if there are no questions from the group, and please, if you either speak out now or put it in the chat. I do have actually a general question both for the participants and for our speakers. And that is, we've learned some really great information tonight, and we appreciate you for that. And so I want to ask both our speakers and our participants, what, as county board members, putting that lens on, because that's why we're here as county board members, what are actions we could be taking now, given we've learned all this great information? What are things that you think you could be doing to advance this issue of literacy generally, and also, a focus on early prevention and intervention, and making sure our districts and our county offices are using these tools for our youngest students? So I'm going to put that out there. You can either put your response in the chat or you can just speak out. And if our speakers have any suggestions for us on things that we should be thinking about as county board members to push this issue forward.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to jump in and say that for one of the things that I started with is what the data is. So I think an awareness of the data in your counties is really important. And as I mentioned, it feels a bit like people are immune to that, like they're accepting that. And so when I say 53% of our students are not reading at grade level, now if you look at, I'm thinking of what Miss Kimberly said around young Black men, the data is abysmal. I don't have it in front of me because I closed that tab, but I want to say it's in the teens reading at grade level. So we really have to be keeping the data front and center and asking questions about how literacy is being taught, because as Marlu said, explicit, systematic, and direct is going to support our students who are at risk. And are we using evidence-based practices, and are we giving them double doses and multiple opportunities? And are we making sure that we're not waiting for them to fail, but that we're doing that early intervention piece? So I think, just asking questions, keeping the conversation going, and not letting people become immune to this. Like it's really not okay. We should be doing better. We know how to do better. We're just not doing it.
Thank you, Tammy. That was really spot on. And Raina, I like your comment. Spread awareness that early detection and intervention is needed to support our equity objectives. So, great.
And
you want to say anything?
I do want to piggyback on that and just say, teaching reading is equity. It
nice.
creates equity. And so when we talk about equity initiatives, reading should be front and center, because literacy should be a right, and it is an equity issue. And if we don't keep it there and really present it as an equity issue, we're kind of missing something.
And as you said, my father's has served on the Juvenile Justice Committee. He's been a coach in Oakland, and the studies will tell you, if you look at the men of color that are incarcerated, their reading levels are at a 3rd grade reading level. It's all interconnected. It's all interconnected.
Thank you, Kim. And Raina, did you want to say something? I saw you came off mute, and you'll be our last comment before we do our closing.
No, I just wanted to thank for the presentation. This is really valuable, and thank you for talking about this topic.
Great. Okay, so, and again, I hope we can all be thinking about ways we can bring this back to our boards, questions we can ask our superintendent, ways to raise awareness in our community. It's a very important topic, and I think one ACCBE will be continuing to focus on the literacy topic. Good trouble, I like it. All right, well, we want to thank our founding members of ACCBE for becoming members and supporting this work. And if you're not a member yet, we would love to have you. And we're glad, Yvonne and I are glad to, or Juliana, who's also on our board, are glad to chat with you about what that would take to become a member. So thank you. And then just our last slide, I believe. Chris? Okay, so just a few things. We have our board meetings are open, so please join us they're all on Zoom, so please join us August 4th. We have a building trustee excellence August 25th, and it'll be on the superintendent salary setting, and John McPherson from Monterey County will be leading that. We have a member experience survey that I think Chris will put in the chat. If you haven't done it yet, we're really trying to collect some data from our members on a little bit about yourself as well as what types of things you want to see ACCBE do. And then just to remind folks, we do offer one-on-one coaching. So if you're interested in that, or if you want to be a coach, let me know. And that's part of our personalized services that we're trying to provide to our members. So with that, I believe we've finished our work. So thank you. Let's give ourselves a round of applause and our speakers a round of applause for their good work. We will hang around for a few minutes, but the session is over and you are free to go to have your dinner, be with your families. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And we'll hang out for a minute or two for anyone that wants to
Good
chat.
night. Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Great
Thank you
job.
so much, everyone. Thank you.
Great job. So, you know, we put it to a vote, and I believe our board is getting ready to come on board, Bina. So I'll be the first to say it. We're coming. We're coming.
Yeah, no, I know. We're glad to have you. Yeah, actually, you guys have joined, but we're looking for
Yeah.
a board rep. So maybe you'll be our
Oh.
board rep.
Oh boy.
Thank you,
we
Kim.
need
It was
we need
great
a
seeing
board
you.
rep.
Yeah, it was great seeing you.
Okay. Oh, so I didn't get that memo yet. So one of us needs to volunteer to be a board rep.
Yeah, to be our liaison to ACCBE between you and your board. So
Oh.
I think it's coming to your board next week, I think.
Look, we have board meeting tomorrow.
Oh,
So
tomorrow. It's going to come tomorrow to your board.
okay. So you've talked to Brian? You've been talking to Marcy?
Marcy actually reached out to me. Yeah.
Does she have any suggestion? Has she made any suggestions as to whom she would like that person to be?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm just asking because
yeah.
when I go in the meeting, if I know if she's leaning towards whom she might like as Madam Vice President, you know, she stays in her lane over here. She stays in her lane.
Okay.
Doesn't overstep, but okay. Well, you know, I love working with you, Bina. I might consider it. I might, because you remember when they were breaking off now. Christopher, hi, how are you, my love?
Hey there.
You can come off mute now. Look, when things started going downhill, they tried to call on your girl to step into the second seat, and I was like, "Oh no, I can't do it." Look, the ship was sinking, and they tried to put it on her. She said, "No, no," and I'm so glad I didn't, Bina, because you know, Bina, what we were going through, and I'm so.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. Anyway, well, good to see you. How about Yvonne and Sarah? You guys okay?
Are they there? Hello?
Oh, this is Yvonne Chan. I'm there. Since you're from Fresno, I gotta tell you a Fresno story.
I know. I should have checked to see who was on the call before I started talking first.
Fresh off the boat in San Francisco, I ended up in Fresno.
Did you?
Fresno, bless their heart, my first year picking grapes or oranges. That made my day, taught me Spanish, but more importantly is during my 8 years on the California State Board, I worked closely with Fresno Unified. Those time you have Hanson as the superintendent.
Yes.
In your very Fresno Unified, you were a trustee, right?
Yes, I was a librarian also for Fresno Unified, yes.
It's very innovative.
What position did you hold for the district?
I am right now on the Los Angeles County Board. I was a school principal for Los Angeles Unified School District and a special ed teacher and a CELPA director. But then I served 8 years on the California State Board under Schwarzenegger and Jerry Brown.
Nice. Now, did you work any for Fresno Unified School District?
That is when, under the state board, I worked with Fresno Unified and all the seven unified school district to be a different, very innovative, waiver-free, district to, be able to have your own goals. I think it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much more about Fresno Unified, but more importantly, Fresno gave me my first break as an 18-year-old.
I love it.
Immigrant working in your Chinatown, picking your grapes. And
And you know, my father has the same story. He cut the grapes. He was there as a young youth, and back then they had to work with a father. So his father took him out the first time, and then the next time he went out, he had to say, "Oh, that gentleman is my father. That gentleman is my father." And then finally, the lead foreman said, "Tapscott, just get on the truck," because he was determined to work. Yes, yes.
yes, yes, we were the Chinese that walk across the picket line.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Oh, pleasure to talk to you. I can't wait to meet you in person. And let's see, Sarah's still on, and you're driving, Sarah. You're determined.
Sarah's
Yeah.
always in the car.
Well, sometimes I am. So wait, I just wanted to say one thing. This was really great, absolutely
Yes.
great. The one piece that always frustrates me, having, we had the presentation about the multitude screening thing at our last meeting. And, we asked how many K-2 students do we have? 23. We have 23 K-2 students. Okay, so the bigger problem for us is the Corton Community Schools. And it's between second grade and ninth grade, that's 7 years or whatever. I'm thinking, I want to do more for those kids that are in high school now that are way below grade level, but we aren't really talking about that so much. There was one slide that someone had that was something about older students.
Right.
So actually what we're planning, Sarah, is in the fall,
Yeah.
we want to do another session. We're going to be working with the same group to plan another literacy spotlight, but focused on the older students and some of the things that's being done to
Oh,
support.
good.
And also, Sarah,
Great.
this is Yvonne.
Yeah.
January 27th, I'm talking about 5 months ago, our very, very first webinar
Uh-huh.
with Dr. Yoshimoto of UCLA. And that's exactly, it's in tape. You can go back and listen to it. We address the impacted youth who couldn't read. So
Great.
So we started this back in January.
Oh, good. Yeah, I don't know, maybe I missed that one. So the recordings there?
Right on board.
It's on the website.
Okay, great.
But the
Great.
the strategy, you're talking about multiply screener, it is transferable to these older kids. So being a special ed teacher myself and really struggling with the older kids, I'm certainly ACCBE with all this, outreach to find really practical, action-oriented, transferable process and skills for what we learn for the bookend, the early eds, as well as our older kids who are in our halls and camps who couldn't read for 9 years. But we did start in January.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Christopher,
Yeah,
thank you so
well,
much.
good,
We
good.
appreciate
Yeah, no,
you.
and our-
We could go on and on. We better release you, sir. We thank you for your service tonight. I look
Yeah.
forward to you all. You're giving me something. Look, I have my meeting tomorrow and I hear we need a representative. I think I'm game for it. I appreciate working with like-minded persons. And let's see, what was the verbiage she gave me? Thought partners.
There we go.
Indeed, we are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Really,
Have a good night. Be
You too.
blessed.
Okay,
Yes, well.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.